good morning. Welcome to Sanofi's booth. We're very happy to welcome you here to discover plenty of innovations on our booth. And you will discover that in a minute as well with our first speech. Let's talk about the holistic and pervasive adoption of AI in Sanofi. And for that, please welcome the head of Emerging Technologies Digital Data, Eugene Steely Liew.
Hear me? Oh, there we go. Thanks so much for taking this time, joining us here at the Sanofi booth. And the goal of this morning's presentation is to kind of give you everyone an overview of how we're starting off and how we're accelerating AI programs here at Sanofi. And with everything, I would like to show a quick clip as to how we actually kicked off AI at Sanofi, and this was an announcement that Paul Hudson had made in 2002.
We aim to be the world's leading pharmaceutical company using AI at scale.
And I think it's really important that that announcement is in by itself. It doesn't mean that we're here to actually utilize AI for the sake of it. It really ties back to why we're utilizing AI pervasively within Sanofi, and it really is to actually have the time from drug discovery to delivering a therapeutic to the patients itself. I mean, shockingly, even in today's day and age, it takes on average 12 years to actually get from a molecule discovery to actually delivering a therapeutic over to the patients. And 12 years is a very long time for people which are suffering from ailments, and in some cases, obviously, diseases which are still untreated today. And so we've taken the tenets in terms of how we're approaching the development of AI within Sanofi to actually look at these sections here where it's simplify, adopt, accelerate, and to sustain. And we'll run through each and every one of them, starting from simplify. So as we had started our paths on to delivering AI programs within Sanofi, you could imagine just the amount of use cases that we're actually bombarded with from a digital perspective. And it really was the effort to actually set up a program that allowed us to actually focus on what was going to deliver the most value across the company for the value chain. And always keeping in mind, the North Star of actually being able to have the time from discovery to delivery of a therapeutic. And so for that reason, we kind of segmented our AI workloads into 3 different distinct areas. One being expert areas where, as you can see with our partners, Formation Bio, for example, within research and development, how do we actually utilize expert AI systems to actually help discover new molecules, how they actually interact, how they're synthesized, how are they actually tested against the viability, even in silico or beyond a digital twin before we actually even get to human trials as it is. And then on the second side, we've got more of a snackable AI perspective where how do we bring AI to all the masses within Sanofi itself, and a little bit more generic. The expectation is not everyone within the organization has the ability to manage an LLM, be able to run prompt engineering on day one, but we've got to upskill the entire organization as every part within the value chain actually helps drives that reduction in time to actually deliver therapeutics to the patient itself. And so within the snackable AI standpoint, we've got an application like Play, where we're aggregating all of the data within the performance data of the organization, allows our employees to basically run what-if scenarios, to basically be able to understand where resource allocation is going to, how are we doing in terms of the business, with regards to the brand within a certain geography, and that basically provides that oversight. It also helps Sanofi become a data-driven organization as a whole. Again, on the snackable side, we'll showcase Concierge, my colleagues there within the booth. That's the front end that we're utilizing as the chat interface for Sanofi that's aggregating all of our chat-like experiences within a single portal. And then finally, generation AI that drives into the different applications itself, where, within the entire value chain, there's just a lot of workflows that actually are repetitive, that has to be done on a weekly, yearly, monthly basis, and how we're utilizing generation AI to actually drive efficiencies and also basically be able to bring a better product to the market. So from an adoption standpoint, at the end of the day, it's great tech, and it only stays as great tech unless it's adopted widely. And that really is the key here within Sanofi and the success and the growth of the AI program. And so one of the key capabilities we have, having established Concierge, is the fact that it is the one single portal that we utilize for all chat experiences for all of our employees within the organization. And that's really critical. I mean, the last thing we need is to actually have 10, 20 different chat experiences pop across the entire enterprise, and it becomes, the fragmentation makes it a lot more difficult to actually experience AI and actually scale it, across the enterprise itself. And so it's really important to actually highlight the work that our colleagues did from a user experience, product management standpoint to actually ensure that the usability of Concierge is at a very high, it's easy, it's understandable, it's a low bar of entry to actually be able to interact with it. And that by itself then actually exposes to all of the different AI workloads that's behind this chat interface. And ultimately, it really also is the platform that allows us to actually drive agentic workflows as well, which we'll run into a bit. So, if you guys have time, please do actually head to our booth, Concierge, and get a much better demo from my colleagues here. So from a performance standpoint, I think these numbers kind of speak for themselves. It's fantastic that 80% of the workforce was able to at least utilize and interact with Concierge once. Just the amount of documents, summarized knowledge extraction that was actually driven from Concierge without a high degree of training, allowed that pervasive use within the enterprise. And, we're just getting a lot of return users as well as a fantastic NPS score. In this particular case here, 90% of the conversations that were logged, they were given a positive feedback. And this is really driven, again, by a very important and structured change management program, upskilling program that we undertook here within Sanofi. April, for example, was an Eye and AI dedicated month to Eye and AI, where essentially we had run self-learning programs as well as roadshows across the enterprise, and the ability to actually train 96,000 employees on the ability to have access snackable AI, but also ultimately to drive out and ensure that we're delivering OI value of over $100 million on our AI programs. And that's something that's kept us all focused to make sure that, hey, we're able to actually drive the programs from inception, get them to actually be an MVP, and then obviously to be able to scale them out and actually make an impact for the organization. And so here we are, where we're at the space of Accelerate. We were here last year at VivaTech announcing what Sanofi was doing within AI, and a year later, I'm glad to say that the program's actually matured. We've got a great understanding of the AI programs which are actually running, and now it's a matter of accelerating it, getting it to be utilized through the enterprise as much as possible, and that's where it actually really counts. And again, this is where we feel that we're able to actually bring about the North Star value of halving the time between discovery over to delivering on the therapy itself. And again, obviously, as Paul mentioned, the nexus to actually be the first biopharma company powered by AI at scale. And so this is the value chain. Extremely long, but obviously people ask, why does it take 12 years? And the amount of processes, it's still a very complex process today, one of the most complex when you're dealing with human biology and all the aspects of actually bringing a molecule, discovering a molecule, trying to figure out how it then actually reacts to the biochemistry, from a biochemistry standpoint, how do we actually manufacture it, how do we actually get the regulatory reviews and approvals, all the way down to the clinical trials. And AI by itself has to be adopted across this entire value chain. It's when every piece is actually functioning at its best and accelerated is when we can actually achieve the dream of actually bringing a therapy to the market. And it's really important to actually say, it's like, yeah, my colleagues could actually be doing a great job, from a molecule discovery standpoint, but if we fail to actually find the right market, bring it to a commercial, that drug never sees its life, it never sees its launch to the public. And, for that particular reason, it has to really be actually, function across this entire value chain here. And so we'll dive in a little bit into what Gen AI particularly does. And obviously, a lot of repetitive tasks today are actually driven and actually transformed just with Gen AI workflows as it is. But over in Sanofi, we're utilizing that from within R&D, being able to actually create the documentation required for clinical study reports, narratives, common technical documentation, all the way down to manufacturing. We're able to actually at scale create product quality reports, which has to be done on a yearly basis, that gets submitted to all the drug authorities. And also, how do we actually bring all this information to the market through a commercialization process, and the ability to do it at scale, whether we're creating documents, assets, driving a multi-channel marketing campaign, and we're utilizing data to actually be able to power all of those use cases out here. And over here, we've got a fantastic Gen AI platform, which, again, I'd like to thank my colleagues here at Sanofi. The ability to actually focus on what the platform is, how are we actually building orchestration tools, how we're building monitoring tools, how are we handling LLM, effectiveness and all the changes between various LLMs, the best practices of software engineering that allows for reusability, allows us to then have multiple generation AI projects to actually run in parallel, given the fact that we've got a solid base in place, through an integrated platform. So just the ability for us to actually scale in terms of what we want to tackle on, how do we actually deliver sandboxes, how do we actually spin them up, run them through it, how do we actually migrate them into production, ensure that there's a viability, they're hitting their marks, their targets, their operating income. That's all done, through the ability of actually having a platform in place that ensures the data is actually Gen AI ready. The services are actually scalable so that they can actually be implemented within an agentic process, and so on and so forth. So that takes on to the next part of what Gen AI agents are. So today, I think within the first iteration of utilizing Gen AI, it's very much hitting an LLM, getting an output out of it, and it's fantastic. We've seen great results out of it, but really we're going to see the next level of growth within agentic workflows, where on top of just the LLM itself, agents are going to basically be able to be autonomous. They're going to be driven by basically solving outputs, being able to get to a decision, solving issues, having the ability to autonomously go through the enterprise, figure out exactly, hey, what task do they want to solve, what tools they actually have out there to solve those tasks, be able to orchestrate agent to agent, and it really unlocks all of that siloed information that's actually within the berms of an organization, but actually allows that to be accessible across the enterprise itself. And so for that to happen, obviously the agents have to observe, they've got the ability to plan, and obviously be able to act on the outcomes. And more importantly, they've got to be able to do that within a responsible framework that's got, that's governed, that's ensured that there's proper taxonomy on the data that they've access to, and to obviously be able to actually, accelerate the workflows, but also to actually ensure that there's a human being involved to ensure that, hey, at the end of the day, we're following the processes within Sanofi itself. And so again, as I mentioned, the value chain impact is pretty important. Where today we've actually had Gen AI applications within each of the silos, whether we're running in research development, manufacturing, supply chain. In this particular case here, it's just unlocking all that information across the enterprise. If you're in the research development space and you're a clinical scientist, you may be focused on the molecules itself, but you're also interested in, hey, what are the gaps within the commercial space for that particular indicator? Today, it really relies on a lot of research to actually head to your counterparts, and as opposed to being able to head to Concierge as a chatbot and say, tell me what are the existing therapeutics that are available within this space, and be able to get an information back within seconds, as opposed to having weeks on end. And so being able to unlock that information across silos and then being able to orchestrate against that is where we feel that agentic's really going to drive the next evolution of AI. And so here are just a couple of fundamental frameworks that we feel that's required to actually be able to drive an agentic workflow. Clearly, it always starts with the data. Data has to be Gen AI ready. It's got to be governed. It's got to be taxonomy. The taxonomy's got to be very clear. But also, more than important, it's not just the data itself, the terms that actually govern the data. If we were to say within a agentic workflow, it's like, hey, head to Concierge, give me the top 10 drug performance within the top 10 market from sales. What is sales? What is the definition of sales? Is it clearly understood across specialty care, general medicine, vaccines? All of that taxonomy, all of that business processes has to be very accurate for an agentic platform to basically be able to explore, take action on. And I think most people today, within an AI standpoint, AI reasoning is around the age of an 8-year-old to a 14-year-old. So it really requires that human, our Sanofians, to basically be able to actually ensure those terms are very well established, they're well understood, and then how do we actually apply that within an agentic workflow. From a security standpoint, as an organization, we're still built around the user itself. As you come on board within Sanofi, what applications do you have access to? Within an agentic workflow, we're moving to an environment which is appless. You're going to actually interact with chatbots. So how do we know what type of security levels that you have access to? It could be, do you have the rights to invoke a certain agent? But also on top of that, are you allowing that agent to access certain data sets? If we're working with partnerships, you may have a Chinese firewall between certain drug indicators. All of that has to actually be driven with fine-grained authorization in place, and obviously the governance and the change management that's actually required to actually be able to enable these agentic workflows should not be underestimated. So driving down a little bit into a little bit of an expert area here, we obviously see, as we're going through clinical studies, 2 patients with the same diagnosis using the same drugs, and they get very different reactions. And that's very common. And today, we would, in the traditional sense, we would actually uncover these issues when we're going through the different phases of clinical trials, human trials, and obviously, the goal is to actually avoid any adverse events. And these are actually extremely risky because it actually drives the failure of a drug. And there's nothing worse than actually spending X amount of money or amount of time to actually see a drug fail. And the goal of it, it's like, how do we actually perform more of these tests utilizing AI, whether we're building it in silico, we're actually testing it against a patient digital twin? How are we able to actually build test cases which are actually expanded, making sure we're actually choosing and selecting patients with a wider basis that's going to drive, less risk in terms of the adverse reactions. And so the ability to actually bring in the data, the insights, and actually understand the patient response and to be able to do all of this tests within a digital twin is just truly extremely amazing before we actually even start having to actually test itself within patient trials. Being able to do this gives us the ability to obviously identify high-risk patients earlier, be able to run tests at scale, optimize the treatment strategies, and actually ultimately be able to have a better chance of actually delivering that drug into the public. And from a sustainability standpoint, the AI program that we have here at Sanofi is key for us to a key strategic standpoint all the way that's going to lead us towards 2030. And every portion of how we're utilizing AI is going to drive the launch of our next 12 drugs out there. And the goal really is to basically be able to take as much of those savings as possible and reinvest them into innovation. We need to get that 12 drugs in the pipeline to be much, much more. Possibly it's the hundreds, but at the end of the day, it's like there's still so much diseases that are untreated. And the goal is to make sure that, hey, we're actually driving the innovation into that pipeline. So the focus really is speed to market, being able to actually deliver that drug, but also ensuring that we're driving value in each and every one of the AI programs that we're putting into place, whether it's at an expert level, snackable, or even within the generation AI perspective. All of these little pieces really drive and move the needle forward ultimately, and that's how we're actually ensuring that we'll get success and also the scalability and the usage within Sanofi itself. And then ultimately, here are just 9 of the principles that we've utilized to help us guide our program and ensure success out there. I think it's really important to actually understand that it's a cross-functional program that we're actually running here within AI at Sanofi. It's not bolting on tech. Bolting on tech on a bad user interface is just not going to give you any better experiences out there. So it's a combination of really building that product, ensuring what the experience is, to ensure that, hey, it's going to be utilized by Sanofians across the world, across all the business units. Make sure that we've got the strategic alignment at the highest levels to make sure that we're focusing on delivering AI workflows to the right solution, to fix the right problems and deliver the right solutions that's going to bring the right OI, and ultimately it's going to drive that time frame to deliver the drugs. Reusability is important. As we're 12 months, 14 months into our process, there are just so many different programs out there, and how do we actually leverage on the commonalities, whether it's knowledge extraction, whether it's generation programs, whether it's defining core claims. How do we build all of those elements in place that we could actually reuse and actually drive out further use cases? And obviously being able to do it all within our RAISE platform to make sure that, as you heard from Michelle earlier today, we've got to make sure that we're deploying AI at Sanofi in a responsible manner, ensuring there's a human in the mix, and ensuring that we're actually meeting all the various legislations that are actually evolving. I'll leave you with this. Obviously, there's a lot of hype around what happens within the workforce within the coming years. But we truly believe, AI itself will not replace humans, especially within our space. There's still so much of a nuance within drug discovery, biology itself. But, AI is going to allow our scientists to actually do better work, accelerate the work they're doing in place, and it's definitely going to move the needle forward. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and thank my colleagues as well for all the work they've done. It's like, please do visit the booth. You get to see the entire life cycle of how we're actually bringing drugs. And hopefully you find that we're doing great work here, and come join Sanofi.
It's for sure. Thank you. Great applause to you, Eugene. Do we have any questions in the audience? It's now time. We have a couple of minutes. Well, I think everything was crystal clear. Thank you very much. Again, a great applause, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, and indeed, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Eugene. And don't hesitate to visit our booth. Also discover R&D, the research and development corridor up to the patient. Enjoy here at Sanofi's all day, and come back at about 20 minutes for the next talk. Thank you very much. Enjoy.